It was a quiet night in our small Ohio town, the kind of night where the wind barely stirred and the darkness felt thicker than usual. The streets were so familiar that I could trace them in my sleep, but tonight, something felt off. I was only 7 years old. My older sibling, 14, had been grounded, stuck in the house over something as trivial as a late homework assignment and a missing video game controller. Our parents had left to check on my great-grandmother, who lived just down the street. They promised to be back soon with pizza. That promise was the last normal thing about that night. For the first hour, my sibling and I played video games, the flashing lights from the screen casting strange shadows across the walls. The house was quiet, save for our laughter and the occasional click of buttons. The scent of pizza still lingered in the air, teasing our hungry stomachs. Then came the knock. At first, it was soft, a simple, rhythmic tap, tap, tap against the wooden door. I bolted upright, my heart leaping. "Pizza's here," I shouted, racing toward the front door. My sibling barely glanced up from the controller, muttering something about it being too soon. As I reached the door, my excitement drained into something colder. Through the glass panel, I could see a man. He wasn't the pizza guy. Tall, lanky, and draped in a long, tattered coat, he stood too close, his breath fogging up the glass. His face was sharp and gaunt, his sunken eyes locked onto mine like he had been waiting for me. His lips curled into a thin smile, but there was nothing friendly about it. I hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob. Something in my gut screamed, "Don't open it." My sibling, now at my side, took one look at him and froze. The color drained from their face. "Who the hell is that?" they whispered. Before I could respond, the knocking turned violent. Bang, bang, bang! The door rattled on its hinges. The doorknob twisted violently back and forth. We stumbled back and panic gripped me. "It's locked, right?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My sibling bolted to the window, peeking through the curtain. "Shit, he's not leaving." The knocking turned into furious pounding, each hit making the walls tremble. Then something worse, scratching. Long, deliberate scrapes against the wood, like nails dragging down a chalkboard. Then, in a raspy voice, he spoke. "I know you're in there." A silence so thick it strangled the air around us. I felt my stomach twist, bile rising in my throat. My sibling grabbed my wrist and yanked me toward the kitchen. "We have to hide." They snatched a knife from the drawer, but in their panic, their grip faltered. The blade clattered to the floor and we both jumped. The knocking stopped. Silence. And then, click! The front door unlocked. We ran. Bolting through the hallway, we threw ourselves into the laundry room, shutting the door just as the front door creaked open. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. The sound of something dragging across the wooden floor. I shoved my hand over my mouth to keep from whimpering. My sibling clutched the handle of a new knife, their knuckles white with fear. A deep inhale came from just outside the laundry room, the sound of him breathing us in, and then... Tap, tap, tap. He knocked on the door, separating us. I squeezed my eyes shut. "I know you're in there," he whispered. The knob twisted. Before he could push inside, another sound rang through the house. "Hey, kiddos, we're back!" Our mom's voice. My sibling yanked open the laundry room door just in time to see my mom standing in the entryway, 2 pizza boxes in her hands. She looked at us, confused, her brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" she asked. We were gasping, shaking, words failing us. She chuckled. "Oh, that was just a guy asking about the old car outside. He thought it was for sale." My blood ran cold. "Then why was he trying to get in?" She gave me a confused look. "He said he knocked, but no one answered, so he left." My sibling and I turned to each other. "He left?" "No. We heard him inside. We heard his footsteps. We heard the door unlock. That night, sleep was impossible. Every sound sent a jolt of terror through me. Around 2 a.m., just as exhaustion was pulling me under, I heard something, a soft knock at my bedroom door. I bolted upright, my breath catching in my throat. "Mom?" I whispered. Silence. The knock came again, slower this time. Knock, knock, knock. I turned to my siblings' room across the hall. Their nightlight was still on, their door cracked open. I could just make out their face, wide-eyed and pale, staring at me from the darkness. They had heard it too. Gathering every ounce of courage, I slid out of bed and tiptoed to my door. The hallway was pitch black. Holding my breath, I pressed my eye to the keyhole. Nothing. I exhaled shakily. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe. Then I saw it. A shadow, low to the ground. Crawling past my door. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. My sibling and I locked eyes again, sheer terror mirrored between us. A sickening scrape dragged along my door. Then the whisper, "I never left." I don't remember what happened after that. I was just a regular 14-year-old kid that night. An average Tuesday, or maybe it was a Wednesday. It didn't matter. What mattered was the time. 9 p.m. The world outside was still, the kind of quiet that makes you uneasy, like something unseen is waiting. I was babysitting my 7-year-old cousin Jake, while my mom and aunt were out shopping. My dad and uncle were at the movies, leaving us alone in a house that had never felt eerie until that night. Jake was curled up on the couch watching cartoons, oblivious to the creeping sensation gnawing at my gut. It wasn't fear, not yet anyway, just a faint whisper of wrongness like a cold finger running down my spine. The TV flickered, casting strange shadows across the dimly lit room. I tried to shake off the feeling, blaming it on the night, the silence, my own imagination. But then I saw him. I had gotten up to check the back door, making sure it was locked when I glanced through the window. And there he was. A man. He stood just beyond the glass, barely illuminated by the glow of the kitchen light. His face was a mask of decay, gaunt, sunken eyes buried in hollow sockets. His clothes were filthy, hanging loose on his frail frame as if they belonged to someone who had withered away long ago. His lips barely moved, but I could see the edges curl upward in a sick parody of a smile. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Jake. My breath hitched in my throat. My body locked up, caught between fight and flight. Every muscle screamed at me to move, to run, to do something. But all I could do was stare into the void of his eyes, black pits of hunger and madness. Then, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, he tilted his head. Just slightly. Just enough to acknowledge that he saw me seeing him. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Hey, buddy," I called over my shoulder to Jake, masking my terror. "Let's go upstairs, okay? Mom and Dad wouldn't want you staying up too late." Jake, completely unaware, nodded and bounded up the stairs. I followed closely behind, every nerve in my body alight with dread. As soon as he was tucked into bed, I moved quickly, my mind racing. The man outside, was he still there? What did he want? Back downstairs, I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find in the kitchen, a meat tenderizer. It wasn't much, but it felt solid in my hands, a weapon if I needed one. I turned back toward the window. He was gone. The breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped in a shaky exhale. But that relief was short-lived. I rushed to the front door, checking the locks. Deadbolt secure. Knob locked. Still, something told me that locks wouldn't matter to him. I crept back upstairs and planted myself in front of Jake's bedroom door. The meat tenderizer clutched so tightly my knuckles ached. "Are we playing a game?" Jake whispered from under his covers. "Not exactly, buddy. Just stay quiet, okay?" I tried calling my dad, but he didn't pick up. Lost in the movie. The police. I had to call the police. With shaking hands, I dialed, forcing myself to sound calm as I explained what was happening. "Someone's outside." He was staring at us through the window. "I don't know if he's still here." "Stay put," the operator said. "Officers are on their way. ETA is about 30 minutes. 30 minutes. An eternity." And then the sound shattered the silence. Crash. Glass breaking. Downstairs, heavy boots on the wooden floor. My blood turned to ice. I gripped the meat tenderizer tighter, my breath shallow. He was inside. "Jake," I whispered, crawling toward his bed. "Stay hidden, no matter what." The house groaned, the weight of an unwelcome presence shifting through it. I could hear him moving, slow, deliberate footsteps, like he was searching for something. Then I heard the stairs. Each step was agony, a slow, dragging sound that sent my pulse into overdrive. I braced myself, but the footsteps didn't stop at Jake's room. They continued, past us, down the hall to the basement door. "Cream's going downstairs!" I exhaled shakily, my body frozen in place. Why? What was he looking for? Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, from the depths of the basement, I heard it. A whisper. Not words, not exactly. More like a chant, low, muted, wrong. The air thickened, pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket, and then silence. I strained to hear, my heartbeat a deafening drum in my ears. Where was he? The silence stretched, an unbearable void. Then, thump. From the hallway. He was back. His footsteps were slower this time, measured, calculated, stopping right outside the door. I held my breath. The handle rattled. I gripped the meat tenderizer, my entire body trembling. The door creaked open just an inch, and through that sliver of darkness, I saw him. His face, grinning, eyes wide and hungry, locked onto me. "Let me in," he rasped, his voice a hollow, withered thing. "No." I swung the meat tenderizer, slamming it into the door. He jerked back, hissing through his teeth. Then, like a child throwing a tantrum, he started pushing. "Let me in," he whispered again, his voice lilting, playful. "I just want to play." I threw my weight against the door, my mind a cyclone of panic. Then, sirens, a wail in the distance. The man froze. He stood there for a second, head tilted, considering. Then, just as quickly as he had come, he vanished. The police burst through the house moments later, sweeping through each room, their voices cutting through the thick tension. But they found nothing. No broken glass, no sign of forced entry, nothing. They didn't believe me. Not really. "Are you sure you saw someone?" one of the officers asked, his brow furrowed. I was sure, I was so sure. But the evidence was gone. And that was the worst part. Because now I knew the truth. He could come back, and if he did, no one would believe me. That night, as I lay in bed, every shadow in my room felt alive. The echo of his whisper slithered through my mind. The morning light seeped through the curtains, casting a pale, ghostly glow in the dimly lit room. I was cocooned beneath a mound of blankets, lulled by the warmth of my bed, my two younger sisters sleeping soundly nearby. Our parents had left early that morning for work, a 2-hour drive away, leaving us alone in the house, surrounded by the vast silence of the woods. It was around 6 a.m., a time when the world still lingers in the embrace of sleep. My youngest sister, Emma, was the first to stir. She had a habit of creeping into my bed in the middle of the night, seeking comfort from the shadows that haunted her dreams. I felt her small body shift beside me, and instinctively I reached out to pull her close, hoping to ward off whatever unseen fears plagued her. Then the bedroom door creaked open. I blinked, disoriented. Standing in the doorway was Lily, my middle sister. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something that made my stomach twist. "Wake up," she whispered, barely breathing. "You need to wake up now." Her voice was strange, urgent, but hushed, like she was afraid of being heard. I groaned, still caught in the haze of sleep. "What's wrong?" I muttered, assuming she just wanted me to get them ready for school. Lily hesitated, glancing back toward the hallway. Then she whispered, "Someone's tapping on my window." The words sent a cold ripple through my spine. Our house was nestled at the edge of a dense forest, far from neighbors, far from roads, far from anyone. The thought of someone standing outside in the dark morning hours sent an immediate wave of unease through me. "What do you mean?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. "I heard it," she insisted, voice trembling. "It's coming from my room." A chill settled in my bones. I threw off the covers and grabbed Lily's hand, pulling her inside my room before locking the door behind us. "Let's call Mom," I said, grabbing my phone, my fingers suddenly clumsy. The screen flickered to life, and I dialed her number. My stomach clenched as I pressed the phone to my ear, listening for the familiar sound of her voice. But just as the call connected, just as I heard her say, "Hello," the line went dead. I tried again. Nothing. No service. Panic stirred in my gut. Meanwhile, Lily had grabbed her phone and was whispering into it, her voice tight with fear. "Please, someone's outside," she pleaded. "We need help." The emergency operator's voice murmured something back, calm and distant. But before she could say much, a sudden noise cracked through the house. A knock. Loud, sharp. It came from the front door. Then another from the back. Then another. From inside the house. I felt my breath hitch. Lily's face went white as she clutched Emma's hand, her knuckles pale. More knocking. More footsteps. Slow, deliberate movements circling the house, like something was toying with us, waiting to be let in. The wait for help stretched into eternity. But finally, we heard the wail of sirens cutting through the stillness. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the trees, and we bolted out of the room, desperate for the safety of the arriving police. An officer met us at the front door, concern flickering in his eyes. "Are you all right?" "We heard knocking," I blurted. "There was someone here." The officers exchanged looks before fanning out across the yard, their flashlights carving through the darkness. Minutes passed. Then more. When they returned, their expressions were unreadable. "We didn't find anything," one of them finally said. "No footprints, no signs of anyone being here." The words didn't feel real, but the officers reassured us it was probably just a prank, or maybe an animal, before leaving us with a warning to keep the doors locked. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I stayed close to my sisters, jumping at every creak, every rustle of the trees outside. The fear never fully left me, but I forced myself to believe it was over. Then the next day came, and I was home alone. The house felt different without my sisters, quieter, heavier. I curled up on the couch, turning the television on just to fill the emptiness. But no matter how loud the voices on the screen were, the silence beneath them was deafening. Then, a bang. Loud, violent, like a fist slamming against the front door. I jolted upright, my pulse hammering in my ears. My hands fumbled for my phone, and this time the call went through. Mom answered immediately. "Go to my room," she instructed. "Look out the window. Don't open the door." I obeyed, creeping to her room and peering through the window. My breath hitched in my throat. There was no one there. Nothing but the empty porch, the swaying trees. The rest of the day passed in uneasy silence. When my sisters finally came home, their presence felt like a shield against whatever unseen horror had taken root in our house. But later that night, when darkness pressed against the windows and the wind howled through the trees, I heard it again. The tapping, soft, persistent. Like bony fingers drumming against the glass. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to turn toward the window. My heart pounded. The night was thick, heavy with an unnatural stillness. Then, I saw it. A shadow. A figure standing just outside, too tall, too still. The tapping stopped. I could feel it watching, my stomach twisted. "Emma," I whispered, nudging her awake. "Do you hear that?" She stirred, blinking sleepily. "What?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stood, forcing my trembling legs toward the window. My fingers gripped the curtain. I pulled it back, and the figure was still there. No features,